A prime-time debate on the issues that matter most to you here in this hotly contested 1st Congressional District race. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Overly. Thank you for joining us tonight. And a big thank you to the great crowd we have here tonight as well. On this rather wet evening tonight, we are asking questions posed by you, and our question askers are KTTC's Caitlin Alexander and Jess Abrahamson as well. They are getting them on index cards from people here and others that you emailed to us earlier. So let's get down to business. Dan Feehan is the nominee for the Democratic Farmer Labor Party. Jim Hagedorn, the Republican nominee. Thank you both for being here tonight. Right. And by order of a coin flip, Dan, you are going to open with opening statements, so go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. And thanks to the crowd that's with us here tonight, and thank you to KTTC as well. My name is Dan Feehan, and I am running to represent Southern Minnesota in Congress. I grew up in Red Wing. I live in North Mankato now, and I grew up with a sense of what our community is. It's a place where people take care of each other. It's a place where people help each other. In spite of any disagreements you might have, that's the reality of life. You still have that spirit of service, of giving back. And I've tried to live my life by that. I served 2 combat tours in Iraq after I witnessed 9/11 and the terror attacks in Washington, D.C. Searching for roadside bombs, trying to capture insurgents, and you learn a lot about what the stakes of real leadership are. When I got back to the United States, I became a middle school teacher. And I learned that the challenges between middle schoolers and soldiers, there's a lot in common there, but you also learned the importance of being there for people, of taking care of people. And those experiences taught me, most importantly, that a leader can have an impact, even in the toughest of circumstances. But it also taught me that in spite of disagreements, you have to work together to get things done. And I'm running for Congress in the place that gave me that value of service, because we have big challenges here in Southern Minnesota. We have a healthcare system that is failing too many people, both with its costs, both with its accessibility, and the fact that a lot of people still don't have healthcare today. We have big challenges in our economy, where we're told the economy is strong, but every day I talk to people working 2 or 3 jobs, working hard to make ends meet because the costs of life are growing greater and greater. And we have very much a sense of fear. There's a sense of chaos in what is a broken Washington, D.C. And I am running for Congress not just to represent stability in the sense of chaos, but to make sure a check and balance goes to Washington, D.C. when we need it the most. You're going to hear a lot of partisan talking points today, but not from me, because I don't believe that's what's needed in Washington, D.C. You need a voice that's going to represent all Southern Minnesotans, and that's why I'm running in the first place.
All right, Mr. Feehan, thank you very much. Mr. Hagedorn, you're next.
Hi, I'm Jim Hagedorn, Republican candidate for Congress here in the 1st District. I'm a product of this district here in Southern Minnesota. Born in Blue Earth, where I reside today, raised on a grain and livestock farm just outside of Truman. My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, all Southern Minnesota farmers. My father, Tom Hagedorn, was a congressman here many years ago, and this has always been home one way or the other because these are my roots. Our campaign's going very well. We won the primary recently by a pretty good margin. Our competitor called to congratulate us, Carla Nelson. We thank her for her service, and we're a united party moving forward. As a matter of fact, we're very united. Just last week, President Donald Trump visited Rochester to boost our campaign, to campaign with us. We appreciate the President's visit. It was a wonderful, energizing time for all. As we move forward, this election offers us 2 opportunities, 2 worldviews. One is that the other team, the Democrat Party, they want to take back power. And they want to resist, they want to replace, and they want to move us far to the left. I'm on the other side. I want to keep partnering with President Trump and like-minded people in the U.S. House to keep moving our country in what I'd say is the right direction. Tonight we're going to talk about many issues. I will offer you solutions to the problems and challenges facing America and Southern Minnesota. I will be honest with you and let you know exactly where I stand. The other day in Otana we had a debate, and my opponent, well, he didn't quite tell too many people exactly where he stood. He talked a lot, but he didn't quite say anything. Tonight, I hope we can have a robust discussion of the issues, and we can let you, in the end, know exactly where we're coming from and what we want to do with this job. Thank you.
All right, thank you, both gentlemen. So let's start on bipartisanship. That's the first question. What are you both doing to reach beyond your base of supporters to demonstrate that you can be a leader who represents a broad spectrum of opinions and interests? And we'll begin with you, Mr. Hagedorn.
Well, I think if you want to represent southern Minnesota, you have to represent the interests of all of southern Minnesota. Primarily, the three drivers in the economy are medical care, which is very important, especially here in Rochester, small business and manufacturing, and then agriculture. You know, I learned a long time ago when I worked for a Minnesota congressman named Arlen Stanglin. He was on the Agriculture Committee, and what I learned is this. You're going to work with Republicans and Democrats, and you're going to work with people who are interested in agriculture from all around the world. You know, we have to get along with cotton farmers and other farmers. Maybe we don't do that in our district, but we want all of agriculture to do well and move forward. So, you know, I've understood that lesson. Another is when I was an executive in the Treasury Department, I went up on Capitol Hill and moved bills with both parties. Steny Hoyer, who's second in charge in the Democrat House, and the Democrats in the House, he's one of the people that co-sponsored and sponsored legislation that I put out there. And so I've never had a problem moving up and working in a bipartisan fashion to get things done. But in the House of Representatives, it's an institution put together by the forefathers that operates on sheer power. One vote, more than half, they control all the committees, all the debate, and pretty much the bills that go to the Senate. And it's a big choice for the people. You know, the Democrats are going to take that place over, and they're going to give us a lot of things that I don't think are good for southern Minnesota. And Dan, I believe, in his views, will misrepresent you on those things. I would be on the other side that would work with the Republicans to keep working with the president to keep the economy rolling, to deregulate, to protect us and have a strong defense, to protect our God-given rights. There's a big difference between the two parties right now. We just have clear, different worldviews.
Okay, Mr. Hagedorn, thank you. Mr. Feehan.
Absolutely. Washington, D.C. is broken because of partisanship and because people that are there, both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, are satisfied with simply just blaming the other side and going home, thinking that they achieved something. I don't represent that. I don't represent that because I know that the stakes of inaction in Washington, D.C. have life and death consequences on people. I learned that in war, I learned that in the classroom, and that is definitely what inaction in healthcare looks like right now, where healthcare has just gotten worse for us over the last 2 years. The approach that I take in bipartisanship is the same approach to leadership I've taken my whole life. I was a platoon leader of soldiers when I was 23 years old. That platoon was more diverse than this country is itself. You couldn't agree on much, but we still got things done in spite of it. When I worked in the Pentagon, my approach to making policy was to take my ideas and go to the person first I knew would disagree with me, because then I knew we could build a real relationship and I could learn what wasn't so great about my ideas along the way. That's the same approach to bipartisanship that is needed in Washington, D.C., and that's the approach that I'm going to take. But it's not just about what you are going to say, it's what you're actually going to do. We've tried to do service projects throughout this campaign, and people give me grief about that. Why is someone running for office doing service projects? Because I think in 2018, it is critical to remind each other how much we do rely on each other. We just did one at Silver Lake Park this past Saturday here in Rochester. The geese still do control the park, but we were able to do up a lot of cleaning there along the way. But the invitation was the same as it was for the previous 10 times before that. I don't care if you voted, I don't care who you voted for. We have to come to recognize each other's humanity. And my intent to take an oath of office if I'm lucky enough to get elected. That oath is not to any party leader, it's not to any corporate special interest, it's to support and defend the Constitution. I know that oath well because it's the same oath I took as an Army officer, and it's the same approach to leadership I would have if elected.
All right, thank you. We're going to give you a 1-minute rebuttal. Mr. Hagedorn, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I would just say I think the best way that you can show that you're going to do your best to represent all the people is to show up in the communities and get to know people as best as possible. And across the district, done some Main Street campaigning, walked 350 miles of parades. That's like starting at South Dakota, going all the way to Wisconsin, crisscrossing I-90 the whole way, and coming back here to Rochester. And then we sat down with people, thought leaders across our district. Could be city administrators, could be social workers, sheriffs, police, others, to find out what's going on in the community. So if and when we were to win the election, we'd be in a good position to work with people and to get started and help people in their communities, all the different 21 counties. And so I just say that the best way you can show that you're going to be fair and representative is to keep an open mind, keep open ears, and meet the people directly. And that's what I've done. That's what our campaign's done these last 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Feehan. 1 more minute.
Sure. Look, this is a topic where you already start to hear the language of division that our country doesn't need right now. The idea of the other team. I mean, last time I checked, we are one team in this country. At least that's the idea that your leaders have to represent. And while the president did visit the district last week, we spent some time door knocking here in Rochester because I believed there were far more people in their homes that night. And I found people on every aisle of the spectrum, because it's important to remember when we talk about bipartisanship right now, there are a lot of people in this country and in this southern Minnesota who feel they don't have a party right now. You have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that's the byproduct of one side just pitted against the other constantly, election cycle after election cycle. Southern Minnesota deserves a different type of politics that makes sure that our politics is public service at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. So now it's time for questions from you, the viewers. We will work very hard to keep track, of course, and rotate questions between the candidates after they have time for a rebuttal. And Caitlin, we'll start with you.
Okay, we'd like to thank all of our viewers who not only filled out cards tonight with their questions, but who emailed in their questions to us ahead of time as well. So I'd like to thank Dave Amundsen from Rochester for this question. What is your vision for protecting Social Security and Medicare? Dave says senior citizens have paid into those programs for many years and now depend on them. I believe Mr. Hagedorn responded first last time, so Mr. Feehan will go first this time.
Absolutely. Every day I hear people worried about the future of what they have worked their entire lives to earn. And that's just it. It's an idea of earning it. So the idea that we're even talking about these things, Social Security and Medicare being at risk, should give you pause. Because it's important to look at what's happened over the last 2 years. We have grown our deficit enormously as a country after a tax reform bill that was directly meant to support the top earners in this country. And the next step of that is to start questioning these programs that people have spent their entire lives paying into and earning. And that's something I will not accept. We need tax reform in this country, but it's to be directly for working people and should not put our social programs in jeopardy. I'm someone who believes that Social Security can become solvent, and there are great ways to be able to do that. I'm someone that believes that our Medicare programs have to be strengthened and expanded so that they're actually comprehensive enough to cover the ails that people have in their lives. Things like dental, vision, mental health. Those things are things you have my commitment that will absolutely protect to make sure that they are not just strong, but they're for my children and my children's children along the way.
Thank you, Mr. Feehan. Mr. Hagedorn?
Well, first and foremost, a promise made is a promise kept. People paid into those programs. People need to be reimbursed and get their money back and then some. And the promises need to be kept. I always hear, they're running commercials against me. Hagedorn wants to take away Social Security. No, I don't. I want to protect it. There are ideas on the table that we could use. We could have, for instance, people, the government and others, people paying into a system when somebody's born so they can grow money all the way through their lives and have even more than they probably would have under this Social Security system. And that would be pretty fair for the younger people who are starting out. We could let people who are affluent to buy out, so maybe they don't expend as many taxpayer dollars in reimbursements. Those are ideas. We could talk about those. But by and large, if you want to solve these, keep these programs solvent, we do have to address the debt. I was one of the few Republicans in the country, I'll admit it, in real time that said I didn't like it when President Bush and Republicans doubled the national debt from $5 to $10 trillion. I didn't think that was a good idea. I really didn't think it was a good idea when Barack Obama as president doubled it from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. And now I think we're spending too much as well. And the problem is now interest rates are ratcheting up. Our interest payments on the debt are going up 2- and 3-fold. Where are we getting the money? And that's what this debt is, what really threatens Social Security and these programs. We need to reform government. We need to grow the economy. The reason they had that tax cut bill was to try to grow the economy. But we do need individual tax reform. I agree with that. In the end, the best way I think that we can solve the problem and protect the people is to make sure we have a fiscally responsible government. I'd be somebody, I'd reform government to cut costs. I'd do that in Washington as your congressman.
Okay, thank you. You have a minute. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, something just stuck out to me, this idea of where do we get the money from? Well, at the same time, being okay with the tax reform bill that has been passed over the last 2 years. We have made a situation worse by putting programs at jeopardy and having to ask this question of where are we going to get the money from with it in the first place. I don't buy that. I don't buy the idea that people who are working their entire lives now have to face that question of, is what I've earned going to be there when I need it most? And that's a self-inflicted wound from the current administration. That's a part of this, that I don't see benefiting Southern Minnesotans directly.
Mr. Hagedorn, a minute.
Well, during the Obama administration, we never had over 3% growth. The economy was stagnant. People were in trouble. And it's gotten better since President Trump's taken over. The market's up. That creates a lot of wealth. The tax bill was designed to try to bring monies back from overseas. Some of that's happened. A lot of those tax reform monies have been passed along, for instance, to utility users from companies. And many Minnesotans, especially in this crowd and others, are reaping some rewards from the tax bill. Do I agree that we need more individual tax reform so people can save, spend, invest, and hold their own money the way they see fit, not the Washington politicians, the interest groups, and the bureaucrats? Absolutely, and that would be something that I would work on as your member of Congress.
Thank you. Jess, you have the next question.
This is a question from a member of our audience, and Mr. Hagedorn, if you would answer it first. Do you believe that global climate change is happening? And if so, what would you do as a congressman to combat it?
Well, I believe that the earth has been heating and cooling since God created it. And I do not believe, I see we have some skeptics there, whether or not God created it. But I believe that the earth has been heating and cooling since God created it. I believe that based upon what I've seen, the proposals out there and so forth, there's nothing to combat it in such a way that it's going to solve the problem. What the left proposes and what they wanted to do with things like the Paris Climate Accords, the cap and trade, Clean Power Plan, and others, is force us to pay dramatically higher electricity, fuel, and other rates, other costs, in order and transform our economy. And I don't think that was in the best interest of the people, the economy, and our way of life. So what I believe is this: we should have energy independence, and we should have an all-of-the-above approach. If there are energy sources that are cleaner, better, more efficient, bring them on. I'm all for that. But let's do it in an efficient way, and let's not force consumers, businesses, and our economy to suffer. I also think we need the pipelines, the distribution points, and the refineries in order to efficiently utilize the energy resources we have in the United States, and they are vast, more than any other nation in the world. And finally, the ultimate goal has to be reliable, abundant, affordable U.S. energy.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fian.
So I'd first like to address the premise of the question. I don't accept the premise of the question, and I think that's an important point to recognize. This is not a matter of belief. The question should cut off that first part and go right to the second. What are you going to do to mitigate the impacts of climate change, period? Because it's not some reality on some far-flung shore or on our own nation's shores. It's a reality here in southern Minnesota. Travel to southeast Minnesota right now. Check out where Hoka Falls was. When I say was, because it's not there anymore. We've seen an increased amount of rain over the past couple of years. We've seen a fluctuation of temperatures that impacts our ag economy here. We've seen 1,000-year storms happen repeatedly in a time span that is not 1,000 years. The impacts are here. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? And how are you going to take advantage of the opportunity we have as southern Minnesotans to harness the energies that we have here, like solar and wind, and make sure we are leaders here? I have a vision here where in southern Minnesota we can become energy independent here. Think about that. Where we don't have to be reliant on foreign oil, something we are still reliant on today. And we can make sure that the best use of our energy, think about the U.S. military. The U.S. military has viewed climate change as a national security threat since the 70s. And it can be an incredible platform in which we can develop the technology that could benefit all of us. The U.S. Navy is trying to become energy independent with renewable energy for the last 9 years. And that's an example of something that we can do to make sure the technology continues to develop, and while promoting solar and wind industries here at home so that we can become leaders on this issue, rather than debating what is a foregone fact at this point.
Thank you. You have one minute. Mr. Hagedorn?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The problem is we can't be energy independent in southern Minnesota. We're a part of a nation that relies on many, many different energy sources. The only form of energy that we're relying upon foreign sources is crude oil. And we're going to be needing crude oil for quite some time. I told you flat out what my position was. I gave you my energy positions, let you know what I want to do with the job. But does Dan, what's he want to do about climate change? He tells us it's a problem. He doesn't tell us what he wants to do. Does he support the Clean Power Plan? Does he support the ban on fracking? Does he support the Paris Accords? Does he support cap and trade? What does he support?
Okay. Thank you. And so what do you support? You have 1 minute. A rebuttal.
Here's an example here in which I can offer a rebuttal right now. That's an opportunity I have right now. But again, this isn't a question of debate. This is a question of what you're going to do about it. And it's not just a question of what we're going to do about it, but the idea that we had an opportunity as a country to do something about it holistically. So we're at the point right now where one congressional district has a chance to take advantage of an opportunity to become a leader in clean energy right now, and to make sure that we are not reliant on foreign energy as we are right now around the world. I don't accept that. That's a national security threat in my view. And so what Congress can do at this point is to make sure we are doing everything to make up for the fact that our country is doing nothing at this point to combat climate change.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Caitlin.
We received this question from countless people, many people writing today. Your comments on sanctuary cities and states and withholding federal funding for those who are not in compliance. Mr. Feehan, we'll have you go first.
We have a broken immigration system. No matter what side of the political spectrum you happen to fall on, I find vast agreement with that idea. And these are buzzwords that like to come up because when our immigration system is broken, it's on the backs of law enforcement, it's on the backs of states, and it's on the backs of local mayors to figure out what to do about it in the first place. So I don't accept the idea that that has to become the status quo. I believe it is a bipartisan notion that comprehensive immigration reform can be a reality in this country. And that starts simply. It starts with the needs we have here in southern Minnesota for labor. It starts with a guest worker program. It starts with DACA and making sure that Dreamers is a matter and function of law in this country. Those are bipartisan ideas that members of the pork producers agree on and members of the Democratic Party agree on. There is room for agreement here that we can make that a reality. I don't accept the fact that this has to become a debate of what to do with a broken system. I think we should fix it. And my opponent here in a second is going to talk about the concept of border security. And as someone who has spent a long time in national security, doing whatever it takes to keep this country safe, I would welcome that as a conversation. But I reject the premise that this is a separate conversation from comprehensive immigration reform. I'm happy to have both conversations, but I'm not happy to have one as a trade-off for the other. Because the threats facing this country have far more to do than what's happening at our southern border. They are advanced, and they take many different forms. And if we want to have that conversation, I'd love to have it. I would love to talk to the President of the United States about that conversation, to enlighten him about what the threats are facing this country. Because I don't think right now he's taking very good advice around the table. Because at the end of the day, we have to do what it takes to keep this country safe. That has never been a questioned idea. But I have a hunch that in a second someone's going to question that. I, again, don't accept that. Our country can be safe, and we can have comprehensive immigration reform because that's what our economy needs right here, to address the labor challenges that we have as southern Minnesotans.
Thank you, Mr. Okay. You're cutting into our time here, so if you can hold your applause. Thank you. Mr.
I believe your question was, do I support sanctuary cities and would I vote to defund them? I do not support sanctuary cities. I do not support sanctuary state. Tim Walz is running on making Minnesota a sanctuary state, which will bring in illegal aliens from a 10-state region, draw them in, increase our crime, increase our costs. It's a ridiculous idea. And so, no, I don't support it, and we should defund them. The situation with the border has been going on for, what, 30 years, ever since Reagan. We haven't addressed it. We finally had a guy run for president that said we should fix it. And he's trying to do that, whether it's building a wall or putting up fences, having merit-based immigration to make sure it makes sense, fixing the passport and visa system so when people fly into our country and overstay their visas, like many of them did on 9/11, that we round them up and get them the heck out of the country like every other country around the world. We should protect the American people from crime, from people who should not be in the United States. We should protect the American worker from depressed wages, from people who should not be in the United States. In the end, though, do I support? I always have a work program so people can come into the United States and fill needed jobs, but it's done in a verifiable way by the government. And people could leave and come as they please or build up credits towards citizenship. You know, the United States is the most generous country in the world as far as legal immigration is concerned. We bring in over 1 million people every year. We're the best people on earth when it comes to that. All we're saying, and what I'm saying is, let's do it in a merit-based way so we know who's here, that we know who's going to fill jobs that are needed, and to make sure that we have some semblance of hope that they're going to assimilate and contribute to the overall economy and be good for the citizens who are already part of the fabric of America.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yeah, I think it is important to point out that my opponent's not running against Tim Walz. That was the last 2 times he ran for Congress. So that's an important distinction to point out here. My perspective on immigration is informed by everything I just laid out, but it's also informed by the fact of my own Irish ancestors immigrating to Plainview and Janesville and being able to find opportunity where they came without questioning and without making them live in the shadows along the way. And that's an opportunity that I believe can continue for America. Every restrictive policy of immigration is going to set us backwards because it has an impact far greater than the policy itself. And at the end of the day, we are in a strong economy now that depends on people being at the heart of it, that drive it. And if we are no longer a welcoming place for people to come to, then our economy will suffer on account of it.
Okay. I said we welcome 1 million people a year. That's pretty good. And I would say this, that when is ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, when are those people supposed to do their jobs? When are they supposed to deport people who are here illegally? I believe they should do their jobs. I support them. Law enforcement has endorsed me, the Fraternal Order of Police and others, because of my positions on these issues. But Dan won't be honest with you and tell you whether or not he supports sanctuary politics. When should ICE deport people? I asked him the other day in the debate. He won't answer. He doesn't give you concrete positions on what he wants to do with the job. I'm being open and honest with you and letting you know exactly where I stand, exactly how I would represent you in the Congress. And as far as whether or not our ancestors, my ancestors came here from Germany. But you know what? A third of the people that came here in those days left because they couldn't make it. But right now we have a welfare system where people can come to the United States and do better on our welfare system than they can working full-time in their home countries. That's not a good recipe, and that's why we want people to be able to assimilate, and we want to have some certainty of that.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. So, we are now midway through this